2025's chilling horror thriller, the Bayou has made a powerful debut. Under the cover of darkness, a police unit stealthily entered a factory, aiming to catch drug traffickers in one sweep. But a sudden noise triggered chaos, scattering both officers and criminals. In the panic, a dealer hastily poured raw chemicals into a nearby river. The strange purple fluid drifted downstream, eventually mixing into the swampy waters of the bayou. The resident alligators weren't immune exposure to the liquid triggered disturbing genetic mutations. Meanwhile, Kyle, a brilliant biology student, still mourned her brother James, who died confronting violent criminals. Hoping to honor him, she planned to scatter his ashes in the serene Florida Keys. She trusted only her best friend Alice with this plan, but Alice unexpectedly invited two others, Melissa and her boyfriend Sam. A personal farewell quickly turned into a group outing, leaving Kyle with an unsettling feeling. Sensing Kylie's unease, Alice quickly explained she'd sold her beloved car to help her mother pay off debts, leaving her no choice but to carpool. Warmly greeted by the unexpected companions, Kyle hesitantly joined the group. The drive to Florida dragged on, but Alice's non-stop chatter helped ease the tension. After a night at a motel, Melissa shocked everyone by taking them to an airport where a private jet was waiting. She had secretly booked the flight to save time. Along with them, 5 other passengers boarded. Everyone expected a smooth, exciting journey. Shortly after takeoff, however, one man kept making phone calls non-stop. Despite repeated requests from Kyle and others, he refused to stop. Frustrated by the noise, another passenger finally stood up, removed his hat, and marched over to confront him. At that exact moment, the plane jolted. He stumbled, crashing into the cabin wall, and was instantly knocked unconscious. Engine 1 failed unexpectedly, sending Captain Frank into a frenzy as he struggled to stabilize the aircraft. Things got worse when Engine 2 began to catch fire. Panic rippled through the cabin as passengers realized radio communications were down. With no other option, the plane attempted an emergency landing. The violent impact sent the aircraft skidding and flipping onto its side, knocking Kyle unconscious. When she came to, Kyle found herself floating in a river. Dazed, she looked around and saw the other passengers already on the shore. Still reeling from the crash, she fought her way out of the water. With Alice and Sam's help, she finally reached dry land. The wrecked plane behind them was a grim reminder of what they'd survived. But now came the next fear: how would they contact help? One of the passengers, Zoe, was badly injured and bleeding from her leg. Acting quickly, Kyle and Captain Frank used a belt to slow the bleeding. Meanwhile, Frank noticed the co-pilot, Ray, was missing. Wading into the river, he called out, but only silence returned. The group's hope began to crumble. The plane had crash-landed in the Florida Bayou, one of the largest and most dangerous wetlands in the region, teeming with aggressive alligators. Without outside help, their situation could turn fatal. Then Kyle noticed something disturbing. The flight hadn't been registered with air traffic control, which meant the black box hadn't been triggered. Hoping for a rescue now felt pointless. Their only hope was to save themselves. Fortunately, Frank was familiar with the terrain. Under his direction, everyone scrambled to collect usable supplies. One man recovered his phone from the wreckage. At that moment, Alice heard rustling in the nearby grass. Curious, she followed the sound and discovered a clutch of intact alligator eggs on the ground. With food scarce, she slipped a few eggs into her pocket. While Frank continued organizing supplies, Alice suddenly spotted a figure standing motionless in the river. Frank turned and saw Ray, somehow alive and rising from the water. He and Kyle dove in immediately, racing to pull him to safety. But before they could reach him, a massive alligator surged up behind Ray, jaws wide open. A heartbeat later, Ray's body flailed violently in the bloody water, triggering chaos among the others on shore. Horrified, Frank and Kyle abandoned the rescue and rushed back to land. Kyle warned the others alligators don't typically attack humans without reason. This behavior meant only one thing: a nearby nest. They had unknowingly stumbled into the reptile's territory. According to Frank, their best chance was to head for the highest ground in the forest to get a better view of the area and plan their escape. As the group moved, the alligator returned to its nest. Spotting just one egg left, it let out a deep, threatening growl. Meanwhile, the group, unaware of what they'd triggered, pushed deeper into the jungle. As daylight faded into shadow, they found a spot far from the water and decided to rest. Worn out by the day's chaos, they quickly drifted into sleep. Hours later, one man woke to relieve himself. In the dark, he dropped his phone. The moment it began ringing, he panicked, fumbling to find it. Before he could answer, an alligator lurking in the brush lunged and tore his head clean off. Morning arrived with horror. The group stood frozen at the sight of the brutal killing. Alligators didn't usually behave like this, but the one they faced was far more aggressive than normal. Frank, reflecting on everything, suddenly remembered an old Florida legend about alligators in these parts. As he spoke, an eerie silence settled over the group. A chill ran down every spine. When the group was unsure of their next move, Kyle spotted a small wooden cabin nearby and suggested they use it as a lookout to plan ahead. Everyone agreed, and soon they reached a clearing. But Kyle immediately sensed danger and urged everyone to stop. There was more than one alligator close by. Unaware, Lisa had somehow wandered to the front of the group. Kyle calmly told Lisa to stay still and turned to discuss options with the others. Suddenly, an alligator lunged, dragging Lisa into the bushes. Almost at once, another alligator appeared behind them. Surrounded, the group panicked and fled. Alice stumbled but managed to avoid the gator's massive jaws thanks to her quick reflexes. They pushed through thick trees and finally made it inside the cabin. The alligators, however, kept chasing. Zoe, already injured, was caught when an alligator bit her calf. Everyone grabbed and pulled with all their strength, but the gator held on and pushed toward the door. Melissa and Sam grabbed hammers and struck the beast's head. The hit freed Zoe but enraged the creature further. It slammed relentlessly against the door, while those near the entrance struggled to keep it shut. Terrified, Melissa chose not to help and instead kicked the wall, searching for an escape. With the alligator pressing hard against the door, no one had time to focus on her. They all pushed desperately against the entrance, trying to buy just a moment more to survive. At the last second, they managed to slam the wooden door shut, using heavy objects nearby. Minutes later, the alligator finally ceased its assault, and the group exhaled in relief. But Lisa's screams echoed from outside, filling them with sadness. They could barely protect themselves, let alone save others. That evening, Kyle tended to Zoe's wound again. Strangely, after retreating, the alligator outside began turning on its own kind, one by one. Glowing green eyes flickered in the dark, as if trying to trap the group until they perished. To stay safe, they took turns keeping watch through the night. After a day of overwhelming stress, Kyle dreamed of her late brother, James. In the vision, James died trying to save a hostage from criminals. As Kyle shakily reached for a gun, a quick thug shot James dead before she could act. Kyle woke with a start, drenched in sweat, haunted by the image of her brother lying in blood. At dawn, Sam found a map in a drawer and showed it to Kyle to plan their next move. Together, they spotted a large building marked just 3 miles past a nearby river, likely a factory where they might find help. However, Frank said he'd never seen anything there and thought it could be a random doodle. If the factory didn't exist, they'd risk wasting precious energy heading the wrong way. With dangers lurking in the forest, such a gamble was risky. A more pressing issue was food scarcity. As the group debated, Malikika suddenly blamed Kyle and tried to grab James' ashes. The captain intervened before things escalated. Soon after, Frank called for a vote. Everyone except Malikika chose to leave the cabin, preferring to fight for survival rather than wait for death. Before departing, Kylie gave a vital warning: never lock eyes with an alligator or turn your back. Run in zigzags because these creatures can sprint up to 24 mph. If bitten, don't resist an alligator's 80 sharp teeth, and crushing jaws can break skulls and steel. Still, their eyes and noses are vulnerable, but only on land. Realizing the danger, Malikika abandoned her plan to stay and reluctantly joined the group. Zoe's leg worsened, yet Malikika pressed on, ignoring her pain. This cold attitude angered the others. Zoe, however, remained silent and decided to move forward with her husband's support after a short rest. Soon, they heard running water nearby. Realizing a river was close, they followed the sound and found the one marked on the map. Since it had rained the night before, the alligators were likely hiding to regulate their temperature. It was the perfect chance to escape. Kyle suggested building a raft to cross the river. After a brief discussion, the group split up and got to work. While gathering logs, Alice heard a strange noise in the grass. Curious, she pushed through and came face to face with an alligator. Remembering the destruction these creatures caused, she grabbed a stick and jabbed it in the eye. As the beast let out a chilling shriek, Alice calmly walked back toward the others. With everyone's help, they soon finished a simple raft. As they began crossing, Sam returned to shore for a bag and encountered another gator. Seeing the danger, Zoe, silent until then, watched the water calmly and made a decision. After a heartfelt goodbye to her husband, she jumped into the river, sacrificing herself to save the group. Watching his wife disappear beneath the surface, he was consumed by unbearable grief. The raft finally left the alligator's territory, but no one cheered. A vibrant life was lost, and sorrow hung over the group like a heavy fog. In the vast, unfamiliar bayou, what new threats awaited them? After drifting for some time, they spotted a house. Bullet casings scattered nearby revealed it had been the site of the police raid on drug traffickers. Ignoring the captain's warning, Malikika rushed ahead, and the others grabbed flashlights and followed. Inside, the walls were stained with blood. To search for a radio or signs of help, Frank split the group into 2 teams. Using the chance, he sent Alice on a separate search, then followed Malikika upstairs. Frank had long grown tired of Malikika's selfishness. Meanwhile, Kyle, Sam, and others discovered traces of a strange blue powder. They suspected this might be causing the alligator's violent behavior. As they explored further, they were shocked to find another survivor alive. Elsewhere, Frank's fury boiled over. He shoved Malikika down the stairs, intent on killing her. Terrified, Malikika clung to the stair's edge, narrowly avoiding the fall. Begging for mercy, she broke down in tears. Frank hesitated, sympathy flickering in his eyes. But just as he reached to help her up, an alligator appeared suddenly and bit him clean off. Malikika screamed in horror at the gruesome sight. Thankfully, Kyle and the others, hearing the noise, arrived just in time to save Malikika from falling. Moments earlier, the dying survivor Kyle and Sam had found used his last breath to warn them. "There's an alligator in the house." Then he died from blood loss. Kyle and Sam rushed to tell the captain, but were a moment too late. Barely surviving, Malikika finally grasped the consequences of her actions. She apologized to Kyle, and they made peace. After regaining composure, the group pushed on and entered another house. But suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. Turning on flashlights, they were horrified to find the room filled with alligators. Strangely, the creatures didn't react to the noise. That's when Kyle spotted something astonishing, a landline phone near the nearest alligator. Hope surged. But crossing without waking the beasts seemed impossible. Holding their breath, they crept forward. Suddenly, an alligator's tail struck Kyle's leg. She covered her mouth, terrified, but the gator didn't notice. They continued until Sam slipped. He clenched his jaw, trying to stay balanced, but fell sideways. The noise roused the resting gators. Hearing hisses, Sam panicked and ignored Kyle's warning. He turned his head, and instantly, an alligator clamped onto him, tearing into his body. His screams filled the air as the roused gators went wild. The rest of the group fled back and barricaded the door. Meanwhile, Kyle reached the phone, managed to call for help, and reported their location. Now, all they could do was wait for rescue. Then, they found another door. Thinking it was an escape, they opened it only to reveal another hidden alligator. Suddenly, Alice remembered something. Under stunned eyes, she pulled the stolen alligator eggs from her bag, hoping to distract the beast. Kyle cautiously stepped forward. Everyone held their breath. But as the gator sniffed the eggs, it lunged at Alice. Caught off guard, Alice was bitten on the arm. She fought fiercely and finally broke free. As the alligator readied to devour her, Kyle fired a pistol. The bullets barely slowed the creature, in fact. They only made it more furious. Desperate, Kyle fired again, hitting a sensitive spot that forced the gator to hesitate. The group seized the chance to pull Alice away, but they were out of ammo. To protect the others, Kyle grabbed a knife and stabbed the gator's eye. After a brutal struggle, the beast threw her aside. Disoriented, Kyle noticed a pool of flammable toxic liquid nearby. She knocked it over, grabbed a lighter, and ignited it. Flames quickly consumed the room, finally killing the vicious alligator. The group escaped just in time, and the rescue helicopter, tracking their coordinates, soon arrived. The nightmare was over. In the end, Kyle fulfilled her wish by scattering James' ashes over the Florida Keys. This journey helped her release the pain of her brother's death. When she picked up the gun and chose to save her friends, she made the same courageous choice James once did. In the face of danger, surrender wasn't an option. Only by fighting back could they carve a path to survival.